Alright, good morning everybody. Welcome back to today's lesson in which we will be covering the second type of structured response question. In other words, your structured response question B. Alright, so before we begin today's lesson, make sure that you have with you your term 2 assignment booklet. You have this booklet with you, and then we will scroll all the way until page 11, whereby you will see this page on structured response question. So you need this with you, you need your writing materials with you, and without further ado, we will begin. Alright, so this question 7, right, actually requires you to explain two factors in relation to the issue that is given to you, and after you explain both the factors, you will need to weigh the factors. Okay, in other words, you will have to evaluate the factors against each other to decide which one of them is more important in contributing to the given issue. Alright, so for this question, similar to SRQ number 6, you'll actually be given extracts, and this extract is not meant for you to copy it down. Alright, this is not a source-based case study, but for this kind of question, extracts are given to stimulate your thoughts. In other words, to help you remember what you have learned before. Alright, and you'll use whatever you had learned before to help you answer the question. Okay, so let's take a look at this example over here. So over here, this question is on a topic which you had not covered yet. Alright, but rest assured, we'll go through it, we'll break down the question and help you understand what is the requirement for this kind of question. Alright, so this is based on O-level paper. Alright, so let's take a look at how would the question look like. Okay, so the question will always ask you to read two extracts. So for example, over here, extract 2 and 3 shows the protective measures and preventive measures taken by the government in managing transnational terrorism. So which one do you think is more effective in keeping Singapore safe from terrorist attack? Alright, so the format of the question will always be very similar. Okay, so let us now break it down. Okay, so for this stage, we'll look at the different colors. So green will be your dynamic examples. Alright, so in other words, green, whatever that you see over here is in green, is actually your case study example. Now, why do we call it dynamic? Because these case study examples would always change depending on the question being given. Alright, so the case study examples can change. Okay, then blue would be the given factors for you to evaluate. Alright, so the factors to evaluate can always be found in your textbook, and all this will be fixed. Alright, so blue are the factors for you to evaluate. Okay, and the words that are in red actually refers to the issue of this question. Alright, so what is the issue that this question is focusing on? So let's now take a look at the question again. So extract 2 and 3 shows the protective measures and preventive measures. Alright, so the blue color over here, right, protective measures and preventive measures are actually the two factors which you have to evaluate. Alright, so and then taken by the government in managing transnational terrorism. So what is the issue over here? The issue is actually on the managing of transnational terrorism. Alright, so in other words, this question shows you that this problem which Singapore faces, alright, this issue that Singapore faces on transnational terrorism, we have two ways to manage it. Okay, and the first way is to actually have protective measures, and the second way is to have preventive measures. Alright, so you are supposed to answer which one do you think is more effective in keeping Singapore safe. Okay, more effective in keeping the country safe. In other words, for this protective measure and the preventive measure, you would actually have to weigh them against each other and tell me which one is more effective. Alright, so it can be protective measures is more effective, or preventive measures is more effective. Alright, or the third way to look at it is that both the factors are equally important in keeping Singapore safe. Okay, So this is how you break down the question. Alright, so now let us quickly take a look at the extract over here. So extract 2, extract 3, the extract, right, will always refer to one of the measure. Alright, so in extract 2 over here would refer to the first factor that's given to you, okay, and extract 3 would actually refers to the second factor that is given to you. Okay, so in this extract number 2, it says, in both the November 2016 Paris attack and January 2017 Jakarta attack, okay, so these words here are in green because these are the dynamic content. In other words, these are the case study that can change, okay, with regards to this issue of managing terrorism. So these are your case study examples that can be changed. Alright, so the targets chosen places which are crowded with little or no security, like shopping mall, concert venues, and restaurant. As a result, under SG Secure, Singapore will increase its coverage. Alright, so these blue words over here actually refers to the factor number 1, which is the protective measures that the country has taken. Alright, then with regards to extract 3, okay, so the dynamic content over here is how the 8 Indonesians were detained by Singapore Customs at the Woodlands checkpoint. Alright, so it can always be changed to another case study. For example, in 2016, if I believe, okay, actually there were 6 Jamia Islamiyah terrorist members that were being arrested in Singapore. So all these examples can always be changed. Alright, so they were detained for possessing Islamic State images. Alright, in other words, the image of a terrorist group, a known terrorist group. And then these people, the group was not allowed to enter Singapore after authorities found several of their images. Okay, so in order to prevent transnational terrorism from happening, the government actually bar them from entering the country. So this is an example of the preventive measures. Alright. So after breaking down the question, how do you go ahead to answer it? Okay, very simple. The structure would always be 3 paragraph. Alright, so your paragraph 1 would actually refer to the first factor. Okay, so you have to follow the PIL format, state the point, explain what you are trying to say, okay, elaborate on it, and finally link your first factor back to answer the question, right? So when giving the explanation, you will also have to give the examples. Alright, so paragraph 1 would be on factor 1, paragraph 2 would be on factor 2. Okay, and then finally your third paragraph, right? For the third paragraph, that is where you write about which of the factor is more and less important. Alright, so when you evaluate, you must always remember to say why is A more important, however, or rather, why is B less important. You have to give both aspects. Okay, so in doing your evaluation, alright, what are some common way of evaluating? So first, you should find a common criteria between the two factors. Usually it will be something related to time, okay, your time scale. So example, how long does it take to carry out? Okay, how long does the impact last? Is it a short term or a long term thing? Alright. Okay, or you can also look at timeline. Okay, timeline meaning which come first. Is it the chicken or the egg? Alright. So another way to look at it is also, is it the tree root or the branches? Okay. And finally, we look at a scale of impact. Alright. So for the scale of impact, we are looking at the different levels in which the factors may occur. Okay. So starting from big to small, it could be at the global scale, alright, at the regional scale, at the country scale, community, and finally individual. Alright, so this is like your GRCI, okay, your GRCI. So GRCCI, okay, global, regional, country, community, and finally individual. Alright, so after you find a common criteria between both the factors, you have to formulate your argument. So you can think of it in terms of, say, the cause and impact. Alright, if I ask you which factor is more important, you can say, oh, the cause is more important because the cause will actually lead to an impact. So without that root cause, right, the whole thing wouldn't even be an issue. Okay, so this is one way to look at it. Another way is quite similar. It will be the underlying cause versus the immediate cause. All right, so underlying cause is something that is always a problem, while the immediate cause would be the trigger event. All right, so a very simple example over here is that let's say someone suffers from a heart attack. All right, he get a heart attack and collapse. So what is the underlying cause? Perhaps all along this person has always been living an unhealthy lifestyle. All right, but what triggered the heart attack? Okay, he has always been unhealthy, but this guy, he decided to suddenly run a marathon. All right, so without any training, proper practice and all that, the person went to run a marathon. So this triggered his heart attack. All right, so there's always an underlying problem and an immediate problem. Okay, or it can also be multiple causal. So the issue is very complex, all right, in which there are many different reasons which all contributed to it. So in other words, everything is equally important. All right, and as I mentioned before, there's the idea of the root cause. Okay, what is the underlying problem which lead to something to happen? All right, so finally, argue both sides. So why is factor 1 more important and why is factor 2 less important? Okay, you have to give both sides. All right, so over here, we will look at one example before I leave you to do your own practice. So this is back to the question that was given previously, all right, on how the protective measures and preventive measures are important in are effective in managing transnational terrorism. All right, so for the first paragraph, okay, you see over here, so you write protective measures, okay, your factor 1. So protective measures are effective in keeping Singapore safe from terrorist attack because they serve as a deterrence against the attack. All right, so this is your point, okay, your P of the Pew paragraph. All right, then we go on to elaborate. So protective measures include enhancing surveillance at key installation and public places. All right, so I elaborate what is a protective measure, then I give an example. So for example, the government increased surveillance at key installation and infrastructure. Then I say where does it happen, like the power station, okay, and then places with large number of people such as Changi Airport. All right, then what the Singapore Armed Forces do. All right, so all these are examples examples of what the government do in order to prevent a terrorist attack. All right, then finally I talk about ISA, the Internal Security Act. All right, so after saying all these things, right, then I go on to link and answer the question. So I say, so as the terrorists know that the surveillance is enhanced in such places and on such people, they would not be so bold as to carry out their attack. So I link back to answer the question on how does the government doing all these things over here actually helps to prevent a terrorist attack. All right, sorry, not to prevent, helps to protect against a terrorist attack. In other words, when someone happens, okay, we have all these things in place to prevent them from carrying out acts of terrorism. All right. Okay, so next factor, preventive measures. All right, so the preventive measures over here, they is your second factor. So preventive measures are effective in keeping Singapore safe from terrorist attack because it serves as a deterrence against the attack. So quite similar, all right. Then the preventive measures includes effective border control and collaboration between countries, all right. So for example, as part of the commitment to the safeguard the region, Singapore collaborates with other members of countries in ASEAN to fight against terrorism. Okay, so this part on the collaboration with ASEAN is actually your example on what the government do to prevent a terrorist attack. So they can do things like they exchange best practices so as to enhance counter-terrorism cooperation in the region. All right. So the cooperation has yielded positive outcomes for Singapore and Malaysia. So I go on to give even more concrete example, and then finally I end off by saying, hence, preventive measures are effective as they can help stop the attack and prevent unnecessary loss of life. All right. So I'm linking back to answer the question, how does all these things help to prevent terrorist attack? All right. Okay, so after I talk about both factors, right, and explain what are they about, the final paragraph, which would be the shortest paragraph of all, okay, is actually to tell us how effective are each of these measures. Okay, so remember, this is still an evaluative question. So how effective are both the measures? So over here I say both preventive and protective measures are equally important, right? This is my evaluation. They are both equally important in keeping Singapore safe from terrorist attack, as both the measures are actually complementary to one another. Okay, in other words, we need both measures to be in place, then a terrorist attack would be prevented. All right. So the preventive measures ensures that threat has difficulty entering the country, all right, while the protective measures ensure that the threat has difficulty executing destruction within the country. So in other words, okay, we need to have preventive measures so that the terrorists would not be able to come into Singapore, and then it's like a two-layer of security thing. So if let's say they do come into Singapore, right, we still have protective measures to stop them from carrying out whatever they want to do, okay, stop them from harming the country. All right, so both measures are equally important. Okay. Okay, so let us just quickly come back to this first paragraph, all right, and then I'll change some words for greater clarity. So the protective measures are effective in keeping Singapore safe from terrorist attack because it serves to, okay, this one I rather than put deter against an attack, serves to stop an attack from happening, all right, and responding in the event of an attack to minimize the damage and arrest the perpetrators. Okay, so protective measures is to stop an attack from happening, okay, and respond to the event to minimize damage, arrest the perpetrators. Right. So in other words, if something bad has already entered Singapore, okay, how do we protect? How do we provide a shield against all these negative elements to minimize the negative impact that they may cause? All right. So they over here, okay, the terrorist knows that their surveillance is enhanced in such places and on such people. They would not be so bold to carry out their attacks. Okay, and then I'll just add on, even if the attacks are carried out, okay, the harm done to the country would be minimized due to the quick response by the authorities. Alright, so this one is edited for increased clarity. Okay, so sorry that today I'm having a bit of flu, so you can hear me sniffling a little bit. Alright, hopefully it's not too distractive in the video. Okay, if it's distractive, too bad, you have no choice, but still listen to it and make sure that you do your work. Alright, so your homework after I go through this question is for you to actually do SRQ number 7, practice 1. Alright, so in order to do this SRQ, you can refer to chapter 4 of your textbook. Okay, I think your textbook also have some QR code and things like that for you to scan. okay, to construct explanation, all right, to help you in answering the question. Okay, so in this practice, okay, extract 2, extract 3, same thing over here. First thing, after you read the extract, remember extracts are not sources, they are just meant to be given to you to stimulate your thinking, all right, help you to recall what have you learned in class. Okay, so in the extract, they would always give you the factors, all right, followed by the dynamic content. Okay, so in this practice over here, social service agencies are groups formed by people with a common interest. Okay, so these groups formed by people with a common interest refers to the community groups. All right. So in Singapore, what are some examples of it? We have Food from the Heart. So they alleviate hunger by providing food support to the less fortunate. All right. And then for extract 3, it says that the Singapore government announced. So first factor would be on the roles of the community group. Okay, second factor is what can the Singapore government do? Okay, so the Singapore government announced that the community link comlink program will be expanded nationwide over 2 years. So one example of the thing they do is this community link. All right, so extract 2 shows roles that community groups do, okay, and the government perform in working together. So what is this whole issue about? The issue is on how to address the needs of low income group in Singapore. All right, so how did these two factors help to address the needs of the low income group in Singapore? All right, so the question is actually over here right at the bottom. Okay, so do community groups have a more important role to play than the government in working to address the needs of the Singapore? Needs of Singapore, all right? Okay, so your job is to actually evaluate these two factors, and then you have to answer which one is more important. Is community group, all right, more important role, having a more important role to play, or is the government having a more important role to play, all right? And the issue is trying to help the needy, help the low income groups in Singapore. Okay, so follow the same structure which was given to you. Build paragraph 1, build paragraph 2, then finally you give your short evaluation paragraph at the bottom, right? So you have to complete this practice. You should take no more than 15 minutes to finish it. Okay, that is exam standards, but because this is a practice, you can take slightly longer, and then you need to check your textbook, refer to the examples and so on. All right, so you might take slightly longer. Submit this work tomorrow. Okay, so submit this on the 6th of April. Please pass it to your class rep. All right, so I do not have anything else. I also don't want to delay anymore, drag this video any longer. So please make sure to finish your work and submit it on time, and I'll see you guys next time. Goodbye.